What's the biggest video game disappointment you've ever experienced? For a lot of us, the answer is obvious. No game burned us quite as badly as Cyberpunk 2077. Our wounds are deep, but with some recent updates, the developers at CD Projekt Red seem to be trying to bounce back with some healing over time. Today, we're going to walk you through the rise and fall of Cyberpunk 2077, and maybe even toast to its future success.
I'll drink to that.
Before we run headfirst into the seedy underbelly of Night City, make sure you subscribe to Nerdstalgic Gaming for more content just like this. The first ever teaser trailer for Cyberpunk 2077 came out in January of 2013. At that time, the developers at CD Projekt Red were most known for bringing the first and second Witcher games into the world. This was a huge selling point for a lot of gamers, as the Witcher series was, and still remains, one of the best fantasy RPG series available. Obviously, seeing these devs try their hand at something more futuristic was very exciting, especially when the inspiration included cherished sci-fi properties like Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, and Deus Ex. The hype only built from there. Just 2 years after Cyberpunk's initial teaser trailer, CD Projekt Red dropped their most beloved game of all time, 2015's The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. Anyone who's played it knows that The Witcher 3 is a marvel in storytelling, gameplay, and graphics. It swept the Game Awards in 2016 and is still known as one of the greatest games of all time. Suddenly, expectations were at an all-time high for what was to come next from CD Projekt Red, and all eyes were on the development of Cyberpunk 2077, which, to the credit of the developers, was shaping up to be fantastic. The word ambitious gets thrown a lot in the gaming space, but it is certainly the best descriptor for what CD Projekt Red was promising with Cyberpunk 2077. As the years progressed, it was made clear that Cyberpunk was going to be bigger, better, and more technologically advanced than any game they had released prior. A massive team of people were reportedly working on the game, and it was costing the studio more than $300 million to create. You heard that right, $300 million, which makes it the third most expensive game ever created, right under Red Dead Redemption 2 and the currently in development Star Citizen. An in-depth character creator, hackable enemy body mods, choices that actually matter and affect the content-heavy game world, intelligent AI with routines that would create a realistic city atmosphere, wall-running, dynamic weather. All of this and more was highlighted in the game's promotional material over several years of development. And when prospective players finally got to see the 48-minute gameplay demo at E3 in 2018, it only cemented the idea that this game was going to be everything single-player RPG fans had ever dreamed of. Oh, and a year later, they announced that it would star Keanu Reaves. Truly, there was no stopping this hype train. It can't really be overstated just how much talk there was surrounding this game. The internet was full of memes from excited fans and endless speculation videos. Just take a look at the comments on the YouTube video from 3 years ago. It tells you all you need to know. So by the time the release date rolled around in December of 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 had amassed over 8 million pre-orders and around $500 million before it was even released. To put that in perspective, it took The Witcher 3, which you'll remember is one of the greatest games of all time, a full year after the launch to sell 10 million copies. Cyberpunk 2077 almost reached that milestone before anyone could even play it. This was obviously cause for celebration, and it only drew more eyes to what would become one of the most prolific disasters in gaming history.
Oh my god, Juanita here. Today's news is Novamax.
There's no way to really prime you for the sheer chaos that erupted from the moment that Cyberpunk 2077 launched. Nobody was ready for it then, and the scope of it can't even really be comprehended now, but we'll do our best. You know that feeling you got as a child on Christmas morning? That anticipation for what's to come and the joy of tearing away wrapping paper? But then you open the box and it's like a new outfit for school or something. That immeasurable disappointment you probably felt is a good summation of the vibe that surrounded Cyberpunk 2077's release, at least initially. Very soon after, the disappointment turned to confusion, and then to rage, and eventually to demanding refunds like some kind of twisted version of the 5 stages of grief. It turned out that this ambitious game, like so many before it, had flown way too close to the sun. Remember all that promised content we talked about earlier? Intelligent AI, wall running, dynamic weather? All gone. Or severely limited. You were supposed to be able to choose an elaborate background for your character, but were instead given a choice of 3 paths. Each only affected about the first 20 minutes of gameplay and never really mattered again. The hackable body mods were totally abandoned for a much more basic hacking system that was really only used for unlocking doors and accessing computers. The content-heavy game world that was promised ended up feeling empty and desolate the moment you finished up the available quests. They had said you'd be able to boost your street cred and access specific areas of the map by wearing certain clothes. Instead, clothing acted like armor, like in every other game, by simply boosting stats. Overall, the game was severely lacking in the content the devs had outright stated it would have. And that's if you could even play the game at all. Yeah. Turns out the game was absolutely riddled with bugs. The PS4 and Xbox One versions of the game could be so buggy that they were basically unplayable. And that isn't a hyperbole. It was so bad that only a week after launch, Sony removed the game from the PlayStation Store and offered refunds to everyone who had bought a digital copy of the game. This was completely unheard of for such a high-profile release. Remember, this game had made around $500 million in just pre-orders. So, what the hell happened here? How did a game with almost a decade of development time end up coming out this badly? Well, in a rare move for game developers, CD Projekt co-founder Marcin Nowinski shared a public apology and explanation on Twitter in January of 2021. He explained to players that the dev team had approached the development of Cyberpunk 2077 with the PC version in mind first. They wanted to make sure the PC experience was epic and figured that they'd work out the console constraints later. This was an obviously faulty way of thinking, but it also doesn't tell the whole story, seeing as the PC version of the game is also really buggy. And that doesn't explain the lack of promised content either. Marcin also makes reference to the conditions in which the last year of development was held in. We all know that 2020 was a hell of a year, and the CD Projekt Red team felt the effects just as strongly as we all did. But this game was originally announced in 2013, so they've had plenty of time to sort through what would and wouldn't be feasible. Not to mention the fact that Cyberpunk's release date was changed multiple times before they eventually settled on December 10th, 2020, right before the holiday season. There's no real way to know what went on behind closed doors, but it seems like the dev team just bit off way more than they could chew with this game. They ran up a ridiculous budget, and they felt pressured to release the game before the hype died down, and they missed that all-important holiday release bracket. And all those factors created the perfect storm for failure. But this isn't the end of Cyberpunk 2077's story. Just recently, CD Projekt Red gave players a massive update. It doesn't fix all the issues, not even close, but Update 1.5 has majorly changed the game on the whole. They've tweaked combat and crowd AI, they added additional character customization features, and even included the ability to customize your starter apartment. Driving around the city is easier and more intuitive than ever, and the overall game performance across all platforms has drastically improved. I mean, really, the list of additions and fixes could have taken up the entire length of this video, and it was all done for free by the dev team a year after the game's initial release. And people are loving it. The game's recent Steam reviews are mostly positive, and the lowered price tag isn't hurting it either. I know the impulse to never trust them again is strong. I personally had to fight against it, but if we really boycotted every game studio that released a broken game, then we wouldn't have any games to play at all. At least Cyberpunk's dev team is working on improving their product after essentially ruining their reputation and destroying every ounce of goodwill they had earned up until now. Most studios don't even bother doing that.
Everything's under control. Just a simple weapon malfunction.
Now, that's not to say the state in which Cyberpunk 2077 was released is acceptable. It definitely wasn't, and nobody can argue otherwise. And there's certainly something to be said about the game's themes of greedy corporate overlords equating to some real-life decisions made by the management team over at CD Projekt. But if the dev team continues to make improvements, then we may actually see that originally promised final product one day. It might not ever heal the wound, but it can patch it. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you're still here, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel and tell us what you think of Cyberpunk 2077 in the comments. Do you trust CD Projekt Red as developers, or is that bridge burned? Let us know, and we'll see you next time.